Hey, we're just waiting for the military crosswind to sort his fucking admin out.
Whoa. Tiger.
Part 2, mate. Steve Heaney, MC Part 2. Let's recap. So,
how long have we got for the recap?
Fucking hell. I'd say how long do you need, but we'll be here an hour at a time.
Yeah.
Mate, I tell you what, buddy, first one was a good podcast. Really good, mate. But it needed that time. That time, right? And it was no way to Russia. So, well, I did try and rush it, but it didn't fucking work anyway. Stubborn northerner. Right, so, just like a brief recap, and I'm going to say it. I'll control it, mate. And then you just jump in wherever. Deployed to Sierra Leone, not Palliser, 1 power battle group in a short, rapid fire amount of time. So, people listening to this, and you haven't heard part 1, you need to go back about 2 episodes before. Listen to Steve Heaney MC Part 1 to get a gist of where we're at. So, 2000 in Sierra Leone. You deployed 1 power between the airport and the embassy. You have gone through the first series of battles on the ground in the jungle in the village called Lungilol. And 1 power have come in to provide a relief in place. Okay, you've now got proper scales of ammunition, because you initially deployed with 40 rounds a man, right, and some other stuff. You've now got proper scales of ammunition. You've dealt with Brian Budd VC, rest his soul. At the time, dealt with the female casualty. Yeah. Female civilian casualty, got shot in the chest.
Shot in the shoulder.
Shot in the shoulder. Did she survive?
Yeah, she did, yeah.
And the platoon has decided... Well, let's take it from there. 1 power have just come in.
So 1 power got in about 8:30 in the morning. About 30 of them. So platoon.
Just a reminder of how strong you were at the time.
26.
26, cool. Yeah.
26. So
sorry. This is the last time I interrupt, Steve. Sorry.
Okay.
In the midst of what's gone on,
the
platoon commander's gone back and compassionate.
Yeah.
So you're down at platoon commander.
Yeah.
Who's taking over?
So we've got on the ground was Grant Harris, who had just recently passed the CADA. He was the 2IC. He'd come in and, like I said, he'd been with the platoon a few months. 2 para ops warrant officer was an ex-2 para guy, Wags Wardle, Graham Wardle. Awesome. So he was the ops warrant officer on the ground. So there was me and him on the ground, and then back in Lungi was a CQMS ex-1 para guy, Eddie Newell. So he was manning the rear. He was manning the rear link. So he had himself and 4 scalies back in the airport. So they were doing our admin, and then they were manning our radio link. Our link was 24. We had a 24-hour listening watch on. So there's 26 of us on the ground in the jungle. 1 para came in about 8:30. Again, about 30. So they had the. So it wasn't the platoon commander that brought them in. It was the company commander. So company sergeant major came in. About 28 blokes. They instantly took over our positions and almost sort of basically followed exactly what we were doing. So they kind of took over our battle trenches, and they'd set up a little VCP on the road at the entrance to the village, and they were generally going about their business as paratroopers do, zipping about all over, getting a feel for the ground, and again, because we just didn't know what was going to happen next. It was one of those situations where the rebels could come back at any time.
So, So on those initial contacts that happened before, what was it determined that was that almost like a forward sort of recce element to use the term?
We didn't. Yeah, it could have been a probe. I mean, the thing is, prior, nobody had ever engaged the rebels. We didn't fully understand what they were going to do. Prior to that, they just steamrolled over everyone, including the UN. They had such numbers, we couldn't control who was coming in and out of the village. So the biggest scare was how many of them had actually infiltrated the village. Had they done any recce's? Had they had any eyes on? Had they plotted our positions? Was that a probe to test us? We just didn't know. So, as you do, prepare for the best, expect the worst and all that. That first night, we hoped that was enough. I mean, of course we wanted them to come back in daylight, because obviously then the advantage switches to us then. We're trained marksmen, we're better shots, more disciplined, we've got ammunition now. Then it's a case of, it's very easy to pick people off. So one para took over. We kind of took a breath then, get around the blokes. We redistributed one ammo. We scrounged a little bit of ammo off the one para guys. So we're just rebombing. Blokes are just carrying out some admin while one para, in effect, took over the duties in the village. It was at that point that we decided, well, if they're wounded, if this animal is wounded, if this animal is bleeding, if this animal is undisciplined, then there is a very strong chance that we could catch it here, and pretty much end the threat there and then. So we took the decision to send out a fighting patrol from the village. We would leave 2 guys in the village, which would be Grant Harris and our 216 guy, the radio op. And the 24 would divide into 2 12-man teams. I would take one, Wagwaddle would take the other one. And we would push out. Initially, we thought we'd push out to the maximum range of the clansmen's. All we had was 349s. So
right, okay.
That's all we had for inter-patrol radios. So, I mean, 1.5k, even that in the jungle, we all know comms are terrible in the jungle. So we thought we'll push out maximum LOE, limit of exploitation, 1.5k. We'll see what we can find. It also doubled up as a bit of a clearance patrol, if anything, because of the vegetation and the folds in the ground and the runs that were leading away, there could have been dead, there could have been wounded, there could have been anything there. So a bit of a confirmation, but also, let's just go and give them another thumping if we can. So cleared it with one para and we set off. The village, as we said initially, was dissected. The main track that was running from the east of the country was from Port Loco. That was really the hive of rebel activity. That was where they were basing themselves out of. And they were making that journey west along the main track. And this track was sort of, 20 feet wide, hardened packed sand. That was it. It was called the Port Loco Road, but that was it. So that was kind of our handrail. So I kind of pushed about 150 metres north of it, and Wag and his team pushed 150 metres south of this track. And then we kind of patrolled across this sort of cleared area that we'd got cutting down, the villagers to cut down, to open up the fields of fire. And after about 600-700 metres, we entered the canopy. Now, it wasn't completely cleared shrub and scrub, but you could basically see. So at that point, for the first 500-600 metres, I could see the other team moving, sort of 300 metres to my right-hand side. Yeah, so that was it. We pushed into the jungle. Like I said, we hit the edge of the tree line after about 600 metres, and then we kind of pushed in a little bit more, and then and then we went at that point. Visibility was down to your usual jungle, sort of 10-15 metres maximum. Quite thick, quite dark, as you can imagine, a solid canopy cover, so there wasn't a lot of light getting in. And we decided to push, and obviously they were just handrailing. We were handrailing the track, and they were, the team off to the right were just handrailing, and we were keeping in comms over the 319, just basically keeping pace with each other. It was at that point probably about 1.2k in, so we pushed into the canopy about another 600 metres.
How long did that take you? How thick was the jungle?
I mean, it wasn't Belize tight, dirty jungle that you get. It was probably somewhere between Belize and Brunei. And for everyone that's ever been in Brunei, Brunei's nice and open. Brunei's more of a forest, isn't it, than that sort of primary and secondary jungle that you encounter in Central America. So it was somewhere in between. Going was relatively okay. Visibility was probably 10 to 15 metres. Yeah, so it probably took us about an hour, nice and steady patrolling. And again, the idea was to try and pick up blood trails. And after sort of after that, within that first 600 metres, there was quite a lot of folds in the ground. We nicknamed one Fern Gully, believe it or not, as you do.
that
on the old, on the old sort of, on the old card, from your trenches and that, because it was a major fold in the ground that led from the track, and we thought if anyone's going to get within striking distance of us, they would come out of the jungle, drop into that fern gully, and then use that covered approach to get within about 150 metres of the village. So when we dropped into that fern gully, you could see all the mushed up ground, footprints.
Where they'd been.
Yeah. And then once we entered the canopy, then we kind of seen all the vegetation that had been crushed. And, there was a lot of sign there, a lot of sort of, ground sign where they'd been walking through, a lot of stuff that had been broken.
Did it seem like, when you were in that first night of battle, you would have had in the morning after, or during it, you would have had an idea of their enemy strength. When you were pushing the jungle there, and you saw the ground sign, did it look like there was more or less of what you thought, judging by the ground sign? If it, was it?
We're best case. We were told 2,000. I don't think it was 2,000. I think it was probably more in that sort of low hundreds, maybe 100, maybe 150, 200.
What, in that attack on the first night?
Yeah, I think
Fucking
there could have been.
hell.
There could have been. But again, the thing that happened for us is that almost as immediately as the attack began, and the GPMGs opened up, I think that weight of initial fire, two GPMGs bearing down that centre of the track, with two skilled operators, that sort of cone of fire that must have been going down that very narrow track and into that sort of, into where the camber dropped away. Instantly, obviously, that the initial rebels just, they were.
They would have cacked themselves, mate. It's like when you were talking about running over the UN, and no one ever put up a fight with them. You think from our experience, you think when a poor military unit, infantry unit gets attacked, they're in shock. Their return of fire is just a couple of blatant rounds, really ill coordinated. Mate, you come up against any unit of the British Army, let alone the paras, you engage that unit, the weight of fire you get back within a split second, man, it'll knock your head off. It'll be a complete shock to the system if you've not experienced it before.
I didn't serve in Afghanistan, but having read and talked to a lot of guys, the difference is, is that, as a trained marksman, as you understanding the marksmanship principles, as you are sort of completely in control of the weapon system. You are disciplined. You're only firing at what you can hit. You're aiming off. You're assessing strike. There's a lot of coordinated fire. That's the difference. And in the process of stealing back momentum, winning the firefight, that's what we do well. And that's the difference, isn't it, between going up against people that are massed in numbers but don't have that discipline. Probably the weapons are in shit state. How quickly are they dealing with stoppages, which is what happened to the first guy. He knelt or fired his weapon, got a stoppage, and he paid the price. So the difference there then, no matter what you're facing numbers-wise, it equals out very quickly with the skill and the knowledge and the experience of trained, highly disciplined soldiers across the British Army, isn't it? So I think initially they were like, wow, this has never happened to us before. We're taking a massive, accurate, sustained, rapid fire that's basically taking out people to the left and right of me. I've lost my stomach for this. I think they kind of went to ground because we measured it as they came 3 times. So there was, within that sort of contact period, there was their initial sort of probe that we dealt with, and then almost a lull, then more movement and another push. So almost, let's give it a second go from the flanks, because we were very, very exposed on the flanks. That was the danger. We had about a 500-600 metre frontage, because at that point, we could see anybody moving to the flank. So we had our 2 end patrols at the limit of where we could control. So anybody moving to the sort of left of our left-hand patrol and to the right of our right-hand patrol, we would see them. So if there was the sort of, if they were trying to engulf us and move round, and envelop us, if you like, we would have been able to see it. So them two patrols were right out on a limb. And then, we've got the two central patrols one covering the main suspected approach route and one covering the sort of only open area where they could mass. So when you've got that frontage and you've only got sort of 20 men in sort of 4 teams, that's a lot. That's a huge footprint to cover. So again, and I think when they sort of massed in them trees, when they must have done their initial recce's, because let's not kid ourselves. Although they're, we call them rebels and all the rest of it, you've got Sierra Leone army soldiers that have deserted. You've got people that have, may have a modicum of understanding of tactics. So yeah, I mean, you treat everyone with the respect it deserves until they prove otherwise, isn't it?
So you're right. So you're 600 meters in.
We were so about 600. We broke. Yeah, we started seeing all the sign, and then it was and then where it was being trampled, then we started picking up the old blood trails, and that pretty much led us about a further 600 metres. So at the 1.2k now, we're 1.2k's in, about 600 metres into the canopy, 1.2k's from the village. We hit the first sign of let's call it civilization, mud huts. Because prior to that, we hadn't pushed out that. Our clearance patrols had only been pushing out, sort of to the edge of the area, to the edge of the canopy. And again, everything suggested to us that that's the way that they would come. So all of our focus was on that area to the front of the village where the track left the jungle and then was at about 500 metres into the village. On the radio then, to the opposite side, talking to WAG, and they hit a village as well. So what we think it was, well, in fact, what it was 5 or 6 buildings on the sort of north of the track, and then 2 larger buildings on the south of the track. So almost as if another village area had been split by the track 600 metres into the canopy. But I mean, this wasn't like the village we were living in. This was like really, really basic structures, with no sort of, I mean, the structures we were in, were the village that we were in had been taking time. There was a track plan in the village. There was an element of manoeuvrability in there, and people had lived there for some time.
So this new one was a bit hastily constructed?
No, I think it'd been there. It had obviously been there some time, but it just wasn't to the level of of Lungi Long. I think it was just people that just, decided to throw up a little bit of a structure to offer some sort of protection for them against the elements. Typical sort of six or 7 huts on this side. So I'm on the radio talking to WAG. Told him we'd found something. He'd found something. So at that point, we kind of said, right, well, we'll go firm. And in 15 minutes, giving each other the sort of QBOs, in 15 minutes, to avoid a blue on blue, we'll both push into the village at exactly the same time. So, any noise off to my right, I know who it is. So that's what we've done on the radio, very quickly coordinated, 15 minutes, and then we'll push into the village at the same time, simultaneously. So again, we're sort of like laid now, just, probably about 50 metres from these structures in the jungle. These structures, there was a slight area cleared around it, central fire pit, smoke coming from the fire, so that the fire was relatively new. So we just sort of, from that point there, just plotted how we were going to move into the village, broke the guys down, moved the 2 guns. We had 2 Gympis, put the 2 Gympis in, moved them forward to provide a base of fire, broke the guys down into 4 2-man assault teams, a bit of a command element with me, and that's what we were going to do. So 4 assault teams, 2 guys on the Gympi, and me and a runner stroke guy.
Pepper pot forward.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was, mate. It was going to be 2 guys, a bit of room combat. 2 assault teams. So the assault teams 1 through 4, going in, bouncing between structures, very fast. There was no sign of anybody. There was no noise at all. To all intents and purposes, it looked abandoned, but we didn't know. We just didn't know what was inside. Experience over the sort of last 10 days had told us that, Civ Pop was just hiding from everybody, So we didn't know if there was civilians inside. We didn't know if there was wounded rebels inside. We didn't know if there was rebels still there inside, getting the head down. So it was a bit of a, we didn't quite understand what we would be facing. So H hour, 15 minutes later, simultaneously, my 4 teams go in and the 4 teams in the southern area go in to clean their building. And it's very rapid, very quick. Guys, kicking in the wooden door. The rooms were no bigger than sort of, 2 meters by 2 meters. Dark, dingy, no light, very claustrophobic. Guys in there, straight in, door open, trying to get some light in there. Obviously, there's no torches. Trying to get some light in there. Make sure there's nothing in there, no threat, and then moving on to the next building. It's very quick, it's very fluid. Lots of communication, lots of screaming and shouting, as you can imagine. And and as the guys were going through, this is when they were finding boxes and link, lots of 7.62 link lying about, not British, sort of RPD link, a couple of AK-47 magazines, a couple of piles of ammunition here and there, blood, mate, pools of congealed blood. So yeah, it was evident that they'd obviously took a hit, pushed back into the jungle, tried to regroup, sort themselves out. I don't suppose for 1 minute they have the loyalty that we have. So I think the people who were capable had obviously had gone and withdrawn, and anybody wounded or on the brink of death were probably pretty much left to themselves. Nobody's on. Nobody's. That whole thing, I reckon that we were no more than 15 minutes to clear that. 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get a real good idea of what we were looking at. Consolidated ourselves on that point. So we're now gone firm on that sort of northern group of huts, and it was the same on the south. Wagon and the southern team had gone firm. Reported in pretty much the same as us. Lots of destruction, lots of sort of stuff lying about, bit of weaponry, couple of AK-47s had been abandoned. But nobody. So on the radio we said, right, let's push on. I mean, we told the radio operator and Grant back in the village that we would push on about 1.2k, 1.5 max. But at this point, your adrenaline's pumping. You can imagine it. We're like, right, it doesn't end here. Let's keep going. So we decided to push on another K. So we took on the decision to push on about another K. Yeah. You know what you're like?
It's a long way in the jungle, mate. It's a long way in the jungle.
It's a long way in the jungle, yeah, I know. But, we were in control of the situation, and you're in your element then, aren't you? It's small team tactics, it's disciplined, it's stealth movement. It's eyes on stocks. It's everything that the LERP school and everything that the tracking courses and everything that we do. I mean, I'd been to the jungle about 7 times by then on various training courses. So, I'm like you, and I suppose everybody else out there love the jungle, and there's a feel about it, isn't there? And I think when you're confident in your abilities and the guys, it doesn't really matter who you're up against, and especially in the jungle, because it's a bit of a leveler. The jungle is neutral and all those classic sayings. So we pushed on. Same thing again. Lots of ground sign, blood spatter, the old drag mark where someone's dragged a foot, heel print. But nothing. No bodies, no real evidence of movement and a direction of travel, but nothing to suggest that we were going to come across anyone. obviously the great disappointment of everyone. Yes, please, mate. Yeah.
Got tea in there?
That'll do. Just put it over the top.
Okay, go on. Yeah, go on, mate.
Yeah. Cheers, Streaky.
Streaky?
Yeah, you know. We use him as a gopher. He goes for this, goes for that. You need to get McVicker on DVD. Anyway, so we push in, and that's it. I mean, I'm talking on the other side of the. I'm talking on the other side of the to the team to our south, and that was it. We hit that LOE. So we're now 2.5 k's in. Pointless pushing on any further, to be perfectly honest. I mean, that might have just been a bit too much. But so we agreed to sort of push to the track. So I kind of turned south and we headed to the track. They headed north, and we kind of just RV'd on the track, either side of it. Myself and Wag, we had a bit of a head-to-head, discussed what we were going to do. Told each other what we'd found, and at this point it was decided that what we would do in effect now would just extend. So if you imagine, we're now looking back, the track's sort of the axis, if you like. 2.5 k's is the village. We said, right, well, what we'll do now is let's just make this a 360. Let's just sort of kind of widen the search, swing round on the way back, just to make sure that
check those flanks.
Yeah, check the flanks. Just make sure there's nothing, no nasty surprises, and let's just let's just make a job of clearing what we can. The good thing about it was, and you remember in the first podcast I told you, so that off to the sort of south of the village was this abandoned railway line. So Wag obviously said, well, what I'll do is I'll continue to push further south and see if I can hit that railway line, and then we'll follow the railway line back in. And again, because that's a great mobility corridor, if anyone had used it and got off to the flank, then inevitably, with any sense, they're going to be moving quickly up and down that up and down that railway line. So he did that. I got my guys, briefed them back up, and we kind of turned, faced the track, and then we started swinging back towards the village. Nice and steady, again, about an hour and a half back, patrolling back through. Didn't really come across anything, to be perfectly honest. And, back in sight of the village and moved back in. We had a code word with the one pair of guys who were technically now manning Stag that we were coming back in. So we got back into the village. Wags' team had moved down the track, found a couple more AK-47s, so that was another three AK-47s, plus the ammunition that we'd got. So there's obviously a lot of dropping stuff gone on, whether it was in the moment or...
Did you take it back in with you? Did you?
Yeah, we took everything went back in. Yeah, everything went back in. So we're now back in the village. That was probably, I'd say it was about half one, something like that. We'd been gone about 2.5 hours. About 2.5 hours
That's
in total.
good going, mate, for that distance.
Yeah. It light scales though, isn't it? You know what I mean? And, you're picking your way through. And as I said, it isn't Belize. It was kind of, a little bit more manoeuvrability in there. You know what I mean? So to be honest, that was all right. That was probably normal patrol pace, I think. So it was steady enough. So we're back in the village. What was the next thing? I suppose the next thing was the CO coming in. So CO One Para came in, got a message on the radio. So he came in with the CO's group about 2:00. So we hadn't been back in the village long. We'd been back about half an hour tops. And the CO's group came in. The One Para company commander went down to meet them. We had 2 LSs, if you imagine. So if you imagine now the frontage of the village where we had all the engagements, to the rear of the village, so away from the likely threat, was where we were going to bring the QRF in. So that was about 250, 300 metres outside the village towards the airport, so away from any threat. Off to the flank and slightly behind the village was a large open sandy area, and that was the resupply. So anything that was coming in, resupply, was going to get brought into that HLS. And that's where CO's group came in. First thing, obviously, we knew of it was the Chinook landed, and then he walked up through the village with the OC of the one para platoon. Usual people in his group, plus the rest of the PF guys who had been in the airport, so they came out as well. So at the time, the OC, or sort of command of the platoon at that point, had passed to Mark Jackson, Jacko's son, Prince of Darkness.
Oh, Mike Jackson's son.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know he was serving.
Mark Jackson, yeah. Mark had been one para, and then Mark was one para. He did 2 years as a 2IC, the PF. He'd then gone back to one para. Obviously, when the OC had left country, he took over command, if you like, of the platoon, and he was managing it back from Lungi the airport. So he came in with Eddie and the signaller guys. CO walked round, got a lie of the land, got the brief off the OC, from a one para perspective, and then came and talked to us. I mean, he was bouncing, mate. I mean, let's put things in perspective here. Although he'd sent us, and it subsequently turns out when Brigadier Richards came in the next day, the idea to put us in such an isolated position, bereft of any real support, was the Brigadier's call. And my subsequent conversations with David Richards, obviously with him writing his own book, we've had some good conversations about the decision to isolate us and the ramifications of 26 guys being surrounded and that. And again, for the CO as well, a big call to put us out there and leave us kind of in that position. So he came out, mate. He was bouncing, I've made the right decision, well done, PF, and all that, and pretty happy. Sent a very clear message, we're here to stay. The mission evolved. People were now out of Freetown. The role of one para had morphed into sort of, it'd gone from a NEO operation, a non-combatant evacuation operation, to almost a coin operation. So we'd now gone counterinsurgency. We're propping up the government, President Kaba's government, and what we didn't know at that time is, as we were having that contact on the 17th of May, in the afternoon of the 17th of May, the leader of the RUF, Ford de Sankey, was captured in an intelligence operation in Freetown. So he'd been arrested at the same time, pretty much. Whether that had anything to coincidence, I don't think so. I think they just got him at the same time. So wind on a little bit more, and that's kind of the RUF bit decapitated now. So with what happened with us kind of really giving them this blow, the realisation that one para were on the ground, and if this was going to happen when we faced 26 guys, what's going to happen if we try to take on 800? We've lost sort of Ford de Sankey. Let's say he was the brains of the outfit. I think that's just what led them to descend into chaos. They broke down into smaller factions, into rivalry, and I think as a potent force, the RUF probably collapsed as a result of those two actions happening simultaneously. But to get back to the next day, that sort of, Paul Gibson had pretty much sat us down and said, look, guys, you've got to stay. I'm going to leave you here. Even when you poke a hornet's nest, he kind of realised that wasn't the end of it, I think. The OC, the one para guys, was wanting to stay because the realisation is what it would turn into. And I think it goes back to the original reasons why the PF were put there. The ability to E&E through the jungle, the ability to operate in small teams, independent of each other, was the reason why I think that we stayed, and the decision to take the one para away was. So they were told that they would stay till the next morning. So they'd been on the ground. They'll be on the ground 24 hours, and they would go out the next day, if you like. At that point, CO said, I'm going to support you with whatever I can now. So we just knocked up a wish list, as you do. More ammunition, claymores if they're in country, HE for the 51, and we went be bold. We went bold and asked for 3 barrels.
What, 51s?
No, 3 81s.
Oh, you got 81s. Oh, well,
yeah.
see.
We asked for 3. We didn't know if we would get them.
That's the...
Yeah.
Oh, no, the battalion has 9, doesn't it?
The battalion has 9, yeah.
So,
so we asked for 3. We didn't know if we'd get them. We took the opportunity then throughout that sort of day. So this is the day of the contact now. We're now in the day to kind of sort ourselves out, get some sleep. One para took over all responsibility for the village for that period. So they were manning checkpoints, manning the trenches, doing their little bit of clearance patrols. That gave us chance to admin, clean weapons, get a little bit of kip. Sort ourselves out and basically prepare for staying in the village. Words of the CO, I have no idea how long you're going to be here now. Just prepare to remain here until the end of the task, if you like.
As isolated as you were before.
As isolated as where we were before. Nothing had really changed. We hadn't been strengthened. We just asked for more ammunition, and that was it. CO stayed. Couple of hours, had a look on the ground, shook everybody's hand, pat on the back, and left. We stayed on the ground, as I said. One para took over duties, and we prepared for that night. Everybody thinking that if they were going to come back, it would be now. So straight into nighttime routine. We've now got 56 to 60 guys on the ground. I'm pretty sure there was about 30 of one para. All in the defence. We still had the 10, was it 10 or 12 Nigerians? Remember, we still had them. We'd stuck them at the back of the village in 2 trenches, well out of the way. Strict instructions not to move. Only point their weapons towards Lungi Airfield. Never move. Never get out the trench. Never fire back into the village. Because the last thing we wanted was them with their weapons running riot in the village, firing what is in effect 7.62. In the dark, you have no idea. We'd brief the villagers. If it all goes loud, don't come out your hut. Don't move around in the village because we don't know who's friend or foe and you're going to get engaged. So they didn't. I mean, the girl got shot, I think, as making a mad dash between 2 huts, possibly. The girl who got it in the shoulder. But to be honest, no, the villagers got shot, which was absolutely amazing. Absolutely. I have no idea how.
But just to point out on this, the girl got shot by the rebels.
Yeah.
And you're saying it's amazing they even get shot by the rebels. Yeah.
No, she must have just took a stray round flying. I mean, because obviously there's no weapon discipline. They're firing high, they're firing low, they're firing into everything that they can see within the village. And it goes back to my point, possibly indiscriminate. The whole holding on to it, yeehaw, firing from the hip in bursts of automatic. I'd like to think that's what they were doing. There wasn't no cold, calculated marksmanship principles being applied. So that's where we were that night. Dark, usual screams, village very quiet, people just in the hut sleeping. Again, massive amount of people in the centre of the village just sleeping rough. Who'd come in
for safety,
mate. Yeah, I reckon there was over 1,000 people in something that the whole village you would put on Red Square back in the battalion. Do you know what I mean? It was a tiny piece of real estate. That took us to the next day. So it was about 11 o'clock, mid-morning, I remember. About mid-morning. Shouldn't have come in to take the one para guys out. At the same time, ramp goes down. Ammunition's coming off for us that we'd requested. Great. Off the back comes 11 one para guys and 3 81s. We didn't think we were going to get them. Awesome. We just put a wish list in. So we've now got 3 81s with about 100 rounds per barrel.
Did you have HE this time?
Oh, yeah, they had HE. Yeah. So, of course, you get that warm, fuzzy feeling now, don't you? So the one para lads, the platoon of one para got on and left. We've now got 30. We've now got 11 guys and 3 barrels with us. We got the guys in, and then we just left it up to. We briefed the MFC that came in, told him exactly what had happened, and pretty much left him to sight the mortars. And as you know, with the speed of 1,000 gazelles, those the guys are digging in. They're getting sandbags. They're getting the mortar line established. The MFC sat with us. We're looking at the ground. We're picking off all of the points where we thought they massed, like the approach routes, any area that we couldn't cover with fire. And of course, he just recorded them, so they all got their X-ray numbers. And I think there was about 11 spots on the ground around the village, various ranges. I think it's really important at this point that we kind of highlight that, this isn't open war fighting. This wasn't a uniformed enemy that we could identify. Civ pop moving in from lots of villages, people coming from every different direction, coming out of the jungle and onto the track, using the track, coming up in old battered vehicles. The use of mortar 81 HE at this point, we were kind of really sort of thinking that how are we going to use this? There has to be some very clear. You've got to confirm that there's people with weapons massed. You're taking fire from a particular point before we start, dropping 81mm HE on top of this.
Because the collateral.
Well, I mean, yeah, and it's very sort of restrictive.
I know 81, if I'm correct in saying, is it 40-meter radius, lethal radius?
Oh.
So from the point that the round goes off on the ground, 40-meter radius, so 80-meter diameter.
Yeah,
that's a lethal. So if you get hit there, that's lethal.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that goes. I mean, that might even push out to splinters and fragmentation at 100.
Oh, it goes on beyond that. I think
whatever.
It doubles,
yeah. And plus massive. That, if you're dropping that in amongst trees and all the rest of it, it's it's seeing it land. I mean, and again, you're back to the old days of. I mean, when was the last time the British Army dropped mortars in a jungle environment, in a canopy, where adjusting is, that's so again, most of the DFs were recorded out in the open, track junctions, Fern Gully, places where we thought they'd mass the railway line, and then obviously the big one, if we were going to get overrun, the sort of FPF was us. Again, very, very strict on that. The MFC said, I'll fire the FPF, but that pretty much means we've been overrun. The mortars are no more used here, and that call obviously needed to come from Grant. We factored them into the E&E plan. The idea, remember we had 1 pins Gower. The idea at this point was that the last thing we want is 3 mortar barrels and 300 rounds of HE and a loom falling into the wrong hands. So the whole E&E plan was, if it becomes untenable, if we're surrounded, if we're suddenly become engulfed and it's looking like we can't win the day, at that point, the mortars, you collapse everything on the pins and you get yourself out of Dodge as fast as possible. We'll make our way with our original E&E on foot as best we can. So that was it. Mortars up and running. Bit of an update because again we had the EW. EW was in then. Mobile. The electronic warfare guys were in. The spooks were operating out of Freetown. By that stage, the informer network and all the rest of it's up and running and. So we're getting a bit more of an update, because I believe most of their comms was mobile phones, Rebels. So bit of an update. And that was it. We just prepared ourselves. So we're now so that was day, so we're probably on day 11 now. We're on day 11. And they stayed with us till day 16. Nothing ever happened. Lots of noises, lots of movement. That first night that they were in, we put up 52 Illume rounds or something ridiculous. Lots of movement. So basically, the sort of the brief was: patrol commanders, anybody sees anything, you call for a loom. They would fire a loom. If we could identify anybody, then we would switch to HE for a loom. But again, the loom was up. movement, shadows, noises. Again, everyone's on edge, and we just didn't know what to expect. Nothing. All quiet. Kind of an anticlimax, to be perfectly honest. So we've gone from that initial adrenaline pumping action, nothing on the sort of fighting patrol, but getting out there, still keeping up that momentum, getting the mortars in, hoping for round 2, and nothing. So that sort of next 5 days was pretty much routine. It was pretty much presence on the ground. The good thing about it is, being a coin operation, we're now completely sort of hearts and minds. And anybody that sort of has that sort of understanding of coin operations only work when you're providing a blanket of security. Surging troops in and out of areas, very sort of what the Americans were doing in Somalia and places like that, and Mogadishu, is that if you're surging in and out, you're not creating the conditions for security and confidence. Us being on the ground with the villagers allowed them to think that we were going to be able to fight for them. There was this constant blanket of security, and they got on with their life, to be honest. The village came back to life. It was a trading post, and there was some semblance of normality. At this point, remember when I told you that we thought that we were going to be relieved by 4-2 Commando? Mm-hmm. The idea was that the Brigade Patrols Troop, BPT, so the Marines version of the Pathfinders, was going to relieve us, or at least the recce platoon from 4-2. 4-2 had sailed on HMS Ocean. They were now off Freetown. We thought they were going to relieve us. So that's what we were expecting. Day 15, radio message in the afternoon. You're withdrawn en masse tomorrow morning, 0830. Helicopter from Resupply, HLS. That was it. Of course, no mention of resupply. We all know where a relief in place is. You don't leave until the relieving troops are in. They're briefed. They understand the ground. They're in your positions. And then you withdraw. It became very evident at that point that there wasn't anybody coming into the village. Whatever decision had been made, whatever troops were available, whatever other taskings had happened outside of the village, nobody was going to come to the village. As you can imagine, we'd been there 16 days. Blokes, kids, they were playing with the kids now, and they were getting our water for us. They were teaching the blokes how to cook scoff and preparing scoff while we were stagging on. There was that real great hearts and minds, and we actually started knowing people by their names. So when we got the message that we were going to go, it was kind of the unenviable task of Grant and Wag. They went to speak to the village elder and basically let him know that we were leaving. And of course, his first thing was through Lieutenant Mojo, the translator, was that, who's going to come? Who's going to relieve you? No one. Blokes were gutted. It was heart wrenching, mate. To be perfectly honest, absolutely heart wrenching.
I suppose the worry was that you would leave, and then the rebels would come in at some stage, massacre the fucking village for having cooperated.
Yeah.
Not that they had the choice of you coming in, but they welcomed it. Is that? I take it that's the worry.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly the same mentality as Afghanistan. And I said I didn't serve in Afghanistan, but the mentality there is that, you have the watches, we have the time type sketch. At some point, you're going to leave. All they got to do is sit and wait it out, which is, which is sort of, what we were thinking. Why didn't the school bully just wait and wait and wait until whoever's protecting the playground leaves, and then he's free to come back in and do what he wants? That was probably the thought at the time, very similar to what you've just said there, mate, is that you poke a hornet's nest with a stick, and what are you going to expect? So yeah, it was pretty devastating, mate, to be honest. A really difficult time, them sort of hours. Patrol commander's not very happy, very vocal. Not a lot you can do, mate. So we spent that last night 15 in the jungle, 8 o'clock the next morning. So again, we had a vehicle, we couldn't get it on the Chinook, so basically I tasked one of the patrols, take the vehicle get his patrol on the vehicle and drive it back. Again, there's always a risk if we have been sort of enveloped and moved around us. It's a bypass policy. We would do it, wouldn't we? If there was a stronghold, you just bypass it and move on. If they're not on if by bypassing them you don't lose anything tactically. So we didn't know what was that sort of 35 kilometres between us and the airfield. So they set off, Chinook came in, and we kind of walked down the sort of central street now, you know, wherever many there was left of us. So there was 20 of us, 6 had gone on the vehicle, 20 of us plus the 11 guys with all the kit. It was like those days walking into Pristina, everyone's lying in the street watching you, wondering what you're doing, where you're going. And the next thing, we're on a Chinook, flying over the village, 16 days to, you know, with exactly that same, with that thought in your mind is, what is going to happen? Totally expecting to hear that the village was on fire sometime a few hours later. So that was us, mate, en route back to Lungi Airfield. 35 minutes later, we're on the ground, walking off the back to that hive of activity. The same as what it was when we'd left 16 days before. We got in, debriefed. By that stage, as inevitably everything that ever happens, once things dies down, everything goes to peacetime reporting. So you're now accounting for ammunition. You're now trying to justify how much is gone, where it's gone, how much you had. Well, we didn't know. You know, of course, we didn't reckon when we got it in there, and then you resupply. But, you know, then the questions, where's all the ammo? What ammo's gone? How much was fired? And it's no fault of the battalions. It's just the way the system is, isn't it? The battalion now has to account for everything it's used.
God with this, mate.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, it's just so. That was us, debrief, and we're now sort of mid-morning on that day, haven't done a debrief, cleaning the kit, deathly silence among the blokes, just wondering, how long, what's happening now, how long we're going to be here, what's the next task, waiting for the next task, to be told, probably the next day, is that we were going back.
The UK.
Elements from one para. So if you imagine one para battle group, one of the companies, A company, didn't deploy because they were in Kenya. So when one para deployed, but they got barrassed, didn't they?
The next year. Yeah.
So A company weren't on that ARP. So 2 para supplied a rifle company to sort of plug the gap within the battle group. So within us being back in Lungi Airfield, 24 hours, the first Herc transport aircraft out of there back to Dakar went. So 2 para went first with elements of the PF. So we were probably back in that airfield 24, 36 hours tops, and we were heading back to the UK. I think we were in country for, well, definitely less than 28 days. I'd say we were in country. In fact, we were probably in country 16, 18, 20, 22 days. 22 days, something like that. And we were back, back to UK.
Well, did it feel like? Let's go back. At that point, what you'd achieved there on that in 2000 was unique for that time. The type of operation it was, then with PF going on and like given the rebels that bloody nose being involved in an engagement, type of engagement that hadn't happened for fucking years, mate. Did it feel like, as we were talking about there, leaving the village, did it feel like a bit of sense of you achieved a lot of experience on the ground, within PF, especially with the contacts, but a lack of achievement practically, in a sense, achievement for what you'd brought to Freetown, what you brought to Lungi Lai.
Well, I mean, yeah. So, sort of to look at it, then
I'm not saying it was. I'm not saying he didn't achieve anything. It's not.
It wasn't measurable.
What I'm trying to think in my mind is all the stuff all the ops I've been on.
Yeah.
I've been there for a significant period of time, and it's gone on, and so there's a plan, and we go towards achieving that plan, strategy, whatever it may be, as part of the overall campaign. So I've always managed to get that. I've not had to deal with what the fuck were we here for. So I'm just thinking from a third person. What was it like being that? Because for me, I don't know how I'd cope with that, mate. Like, it's such a short deployment, albeit highly kinetic in parts, and very fluid for the whole thing, and then to be off the ground almost as quick as you were on there. What was that? What was it like? What was it?
Well, it goes back to what you said. There wasn't no measurable sort of end state at that point.
Yeah.
But it's only when you come back and we sort of... So the first thing we've done, obviously, is looking to make sure that the village was never attacked again. So we're trying to get information.
When you go back to the UK?
Yeah, so we're trying to get post-op reports. We're trying to get information back from, obviously, 4-2 Commando, then we're in situ. Nobody came into the village. They didn't replace us. 4-2 Commando decided that they didn't have anyone to put in the village because of it was so isolated. They didn't put anybody in.
Okay.
But it was afterwards. It was only afterwards when we kind of fully absorbed what it was. And let's put... So, on short notice, a task force from the UK went and stopped incredible brutality in its tracks. We evacuated not only British personnel, but obviously, entitled personnel from a range of other countries. So they were taken out. The country was stabilised to a certain degree. So the belligerents in all of this, the RUF at the time, were I'd like to say were disemboweled. So the head was taken off, Fort de Sanco was removed, stopped in their tracks from advancing. Later, subsequently, and again from all the briefs afterwards, they kind of collapsed and became almost impotent and went back to what they were, was just street gangs, which obviously subsequently then rise to, was how the West Side boys elevated themselves into #1 position. So, from an operational point of view, highly successful.
Yeah.
For a battle group to move and from a start line and 24 days later to have achieved so much, I think was, and it goes back, and I had this conversation with David Richards, Brigadier Richards, when he became Chief of the Defence Staff, was that it's now been touted as a textbook intervention operation. Textbook intervention operation.
Apart from the 40 rounds at the start.
Well, I mean,
absolutely, right.
But again, even if you look at that, okay, yeah,
I'm joking,
I'm saying, but everything happens so that we can grow and develop and all the rest of it. So, okay, whatever lessons we learned of that on the combat service support side, but again, troops on the ground, making the best of it, securing, doing what we do best. The whole British Army, that sort of force for good, everything that makes the British Army and its supporting elements. I mean, don't forget, so we had the Chinook flights in. They made the longest helicopter transit ever. We've got, HMS Ocean, the Navy being redirected and making their way at full steam. So that whole sort of tri-service testing of the British services led to something that our allies, including the Americans, have subsequently said could not have been done. So, take it that, for the bloke's point, being in the jungle, the British Army had never fought in the jungle since the Malay conflict and the Malay emergency, so that was 45 years. We'd never fought in the jungle for 45 years, yet we practice there because it's the place to hone your skills. And if you can fight and survive and admin yourself in the jungle, as we know, that's why it's used on every kind of course, and it's part of the selection process for everybody, is that you go there to confirm your skills. So for us as a unit, we SOPs, we all know you don't change SOPs unless you've had that operationally experience to adjust it. So we learned as a unit, we learned a lot of lessons ourselves about how we react, what we should hold in store, where people should be at certain times. It highlighted what other courses need to be done. So for us, when we sat down and looked at the lessons learned element of it and drafted up the sort of post-op report, for us it was a very sort of very detailed, objective look at us as a unit, and I think for us it was a very pivotal moment in the evolution of the PF.
Yeah, you mentioned that on the last podcast. Just to go back, when I was talking about, I don't want to play it down there. I was talking about the how did you deal with that? What was that like? I meant like the sort of the mental aspect, talking about the civvies and leaving them there. I wasn't talking about the whole thing.
Yeah.
I didn't, in case it came across, I didn't mean to insinuate the fucking thing wasn't success. I was merely calling ops. You were talking a lot about hearts and minds, and so I just wanted to make that point. But you mentioned that on the last podcast about, you mentioned briefly about you felt that was a pivotal moment for PF. What I like from listening to you, mate, now and before, what I like about that op is the risks that the battle group were willing to take. Which I think those risks that the British forces were willing to take with people's lives on operations was reduced over the time since I left in 2011, and it came less and less and less. They were less willing to risk lives in favour of tactics and strategy, because that's what needs to be done. Which is, as you know, mate, from that op, you've gotta put faith in the ability of the people you've got on the ground. Whether you think they're as capable as they should be or not, sometimes, regardless, you have to put the faith in and put risk out and put people on the ground that you were 35 kilometres into the jungle with no fucking support, mate, and then you get bumped on that first night to be able to achieve. Because if that hadn't happened, well, PF wouldn't give the RAF a bloody nose and then be partially cause the downfall of them, along with the leader getting caught in Freetown. And you guys, PF now, wouldn't be the force they are now, arguably. Fair to say?
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, and it goes back to the whole sort of thing of the strengths, our strengths. You can't have an army of 83,000 people and be such a force. I mean, yeah, okay, don't get me wrong. The battle group was overextended. There's no doubt about it. It was overextended. Was there mission creep? Absolutely. Did it evolve into something else? Absolutely. Did Brigadier Richards take risks on the ground? Absolutely. Could it have all gone pear-shaped? No, incredibly. But again, it goes back to that, as you've touched on there, mate, is the ethos. That sort of what we do better than anyone else. And what we do better than anyone else, mate, is mission command. That sort of decentralisation of the decision-making process. You get your mission, so you get the specified task, but you don't get the implied, and that's where commanders on the ground, everything from our lance corporals, our great thinking toms, all the way to our lance corporals, to our section commanders, making operational decisions in pursuit of the in line with the intent, and that's what happened on the ground. Lots of people making very sort of informed decisions, short on resources, but high on capability. And I think that op served the British Army and all of its and that linkage between the other services. But I only seen it from the sort of from the army point of view. We didn't get involved. We didn't, short of using the Chinooks to get in and out, we didn't have a lot to do with the Air Force element, and we never saw the Marines, so I can't understand what the naval element for it. I just understand the big picture of what it took to move and position those pieces so that there was, one para could be relieved and 4-2 could come in, and then subsequently all the short-term training team tasks that went on leading up to Barras and the Royal Irish is that people on the ground, taking command of the country, getting people trained up, re-establishing infrastructure and leadership and a rule of law. So personally, mate, upon reflection and when we came back, I think it was difficult to handle, that we just, it was a very long time before you stopped thinking that something was going to happen to them villages. But we were subsequently, all the time reassured that the village, and it was never attacked again. It remained, let's say, peaceful, which brings a certain amount of sort of, a certain amount of closure to it, to that element, to that final chapter, is that we flew out and they all got to live their life in peace, which was. Yeah,
and something reminded me something I've had a lot of discussions with on the podcast and off around, what was the point of Afghan and the campaign in Iraq and that kind of thing. And one of the things I've said is, even if you have to stay there in Sierra Leone for like a year, 2 years, whatever, it's very difficult to change it completely to be as best as it can be. To be as good as first world is, right? But then if you're able to go into as part of an operation, you're able to go into a village or villages or a town or city and have a positive impact. And even if that positive impact is simply representing an ethical, morally correct individual from a different country, i.e., British soldiers in a village on the fringes of a free town, who have never come across you guys before, or the British before in that capacity, but they have with the UN and things, and you go on there, you make a good impression, and you're not flipping, raping, and pillaging like crazy forces are, right? Then that's a good thing, mate. You can't stay there and make sure they're all right for the next year until the RAF, or 2 years, 3 years until the RUF are completely gone, or the rebels are completely gone. You can never do that anyway. But it's still a positive impact in that short term, and that's better than nothing, right? And that's just from the coin ops, hearts and minds perspective. And I suppose that's something that is a way of looking at any campaign like that, I think, or operation like that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back to the whole sort of, the British military, all three services, were a brand. And I think that's what we have to understand now. And it's that ability for the brand to go into these places and give a good account of itself, and we go back to the whole punching above our weight. And there's lots of components and reasons for that. But I have no doubt in my mind, and I've wrote about it and spoke about it on several occasions, we're viewed as a force for good, because we are a highly ethical, very sort of courageous, both morally and physically courageous organisation, this UK PLC. Very courageous, and we understand, and we use our limited might for good, and to be able to come away from Sierra Leone, the big thing when we went there was these, and what we got to see was they had AMP camps, AMP as in AMP. The signature atrocity for the RUF was amputation of hands. So they had long sleeve and short sleeve, and they gave you the choice. So long sleeve was they took your arm below the elbow. Short sleeve, they took it above the elbow, and they gave you the choice in the village before they took your arm. Sickly in their mind, two reasons. One, because it's threatening and it's danger. But the other one was that if in the future, if there was any voting or any legal representation, you couldn't vote, you couldn't cast a vote to put anybody in government, in power. We find it difficult to sort of justify a thought process like that. But so you going in and you go into these villages and you see kids running around with no hands and no arms. And they just used to take the arms. They didn't take the legs. They took the arms because then they can't look after themselves. They can't plough the field. They can't build homes. And, so they're dead anyway as a result of that. So to come away after 24 days or 25 days, however how long the battle group there was, and that, okay, it didn't stop per se, but it went a significant way to stopping that.
Yeah.
And bringing some semblance to order. And then the subsequent deployment of another highly effective force within the commandos. So 2 back-to-back deployments, bringing even more stability. And then subsequently short-term training teams going in there and propping up their police and government and training. So that continuous presence on the ground of these highly effective, motivated, morally driven troops helped to sort of really sort of set the journey again and allow the Sierra Leone to get back, like you said, to some semblance of normality.
Mm-hmm. How did it affect the way you looked at your career, looked at the unit, looked at your position within the military?
Yeah.
Don't know.
Well, I mean, I think coming back from Sierra Leone was the next 6 months, because we came back in May. I was out. I was out 7 months later. It was the whole process, and let me get, and I want to be very clear here. The British Army turned me and created and turned me into the person I am, and I'll be forever thankful. And when I wrote Mayhem, I'm very conscious that, it isn't a stick to beat anything with. It just means, there was mistakes. There's equipment deficiencies. Lots of things, Klansman radios not working, systems not working. And I wanted to be very clear that things could be done better. If you're going, it's like I said, I didn't serve in Afghan, but you can't wait till a conflict is upon you before you start urgent operational requirements and purchasing stuff off the shelf. That whole sort of development process and equipment manning and levels and realising what the threat and the potential threats of the future are going to be and preparing for it now, not waiting till the horse is bolted and then suddenly realising that, how can you have a magazine-fed support weapon like the LSW and then having to go out and buy belt-fed 5.56 minimes.
When did that happen?
Well, all those urgent operational requirements, we didn't have them, but we're involved in Afghan, we're involved in Iraq before we realised that we need a firepower upgrade.
It became madness, mate.
Yeah.
No, it didn't become madness. It was madness from the start. It's one of those things. It's one of the annoying things that you probably had this discussion a million times. Those annoying things that, as experienced a military as we are, the British, as experienced as the Americans are, albeit a lot less, they've only been around 200 years, we don't seem to learn from all the lessons we can learn from until we're 2 or 3 operations into a campaign that we could have used as lessons at the start. Exactly talking about LMGs, the LSW, I don't understand why that is. Yeah. But those UORs, they changed that process with Afghan. Fuck me, man. It took like 4 years, 5 years from the start of Afghan for them to realise that the urgent operational requirement was needed. And like a review, so we, as an example, in 2006, when we deployed NATOR, the sniper rifles, for example, the scopes, the magnification wasn't high enough for what we were doing, and the elevation drum, because we were engaging it much further than what they thought you could engage at. So harassing fire. They thought the 338 could harass it. On paper, it was harassing fire was something like 1,400 meters. And harassing fire, for safe pop listening, means you can fire a round. Your first round shot at a target, and it'll land close enough to them. Probably isn't going to hit them, but close enough to them to fucking scare them. And that's harassing fire. And they thought the 338 could do 1,400 meters, I think it was. I was doing it 2.5k. I was doing it 2.5k in Kajaki. But it was a nightmare because the scope needed the elevation drum wouldn't go up high enough. The scope was the wrong scope. Do you know how long it took to change that? 2 years. Yeah. That's 4 more operations of other people going on the ground having the same fucking problem. Yeah. I don't know why that is. Maybe it'll change down the line. I don't think it will.
It just, I mean, and like you said, I mean, it's something that I find. I found it very disheartening at the time. If you're going to send people into the arena, if you're going to send people into arena, then they need to be armed, they need to be equipped. You can't go on operations and realise that it's a body armour between 4. You can't go on operations and realise that why isn't everybody got a secondary weapon? You can't go on operations and realise that you haven't got the ability to to fire 40mm grenades. You haven't got this. You haven't got, inter-patrol comms are not secure, and there's a break. You can't. All of this stuff that could be sorted out now as a result of what's happening. It just seems to me that we wait till we're engaged. We wait until the point that we're engaged before we realise that, there's so many deficiencies. And when we came back from Sierra Leone, and blokes were having to leave the 349s. They were having to leave them out in the sun during the day to dry because we got, it was raining and it's that sort of equatorial climate, so it would absolutely flood the village in rain for about 20 minutes. You'd get 6 inches of rain. Then it would be baking sunshine. But so, radio's not working. If it wasn't for the fact that we scrounged a Thuraya sat phone, the first contact report the PF have ever sent was sent on a Thuraya civilian, because the 319s weren't working. It's enough to get you back up. And I came back and we did all the, we did the lessons learned, we did the reviews, we looked at kit we had, problems, everything through the SE8E and all of the issues that we had. And you put forward these suggestions and recommendations, and there's just inactivity. There's just inactivity, and for me, it kind of, I don't know. Was I being a petulant child and thinking, it was never going to change? I don't know. I just got to the point whereas I just, I don't know. I just got to the point where I made the decision that that I was going to leave, because it wasn't until we came back in the May. I didn't find out until the November that on the honours list that I got the MC. I didn't know. So we'd been back 5 months. I didn't know. By that stage, I'd already made the decision to leave. So when I went for my investiture, I was out of the army. So when I went to the palace, I went in civvies because I was out, which was devastating. Was devastating.
What do you mean? In what way? Because you weren't.
I was out, and and there would have been nothing greater than to have gone in uniform and still carried on my career. I don't know. I just felt. Because like I said, I was out of the army. I went on gardening leave in the January of 2001. The investiture wasn't until April 2001. So I'd been out 3 months. I was in a new job. It was just, I don't know. I look back on it now and, and I did contemplate re-enlisting because pretty much 9/11. I was working in London at the time. I was heading up I was on a CP team. I was walking into work and 9/11 happened, and it was the whole sort of towers had happened, and I was in work. I'd just got in that morning, and I was like, right, there's guys on planes now. There's guys packing kit now, and I was like, right, shall I re-enlist? I even phoned up the OC, the PF, and he said, if you want to come back, come back. Same rank, come back in.
Who was the OC?
A guy called Liam Cradden. He's Reggie Colonel now. Awesome guy.
It's interesting now you mention the MC, mate, because we haven't got time for it now, because I know we should talk.
Part 3?
But no, but, well, yeah. But you've obviously dressed over shit in that battle on the first podcast, which is, I need to read this book. I need to read this book. You've spoken about it incredibly modestly, mate. Incredibly modestly. Yeah, I'm going to read this book. I need to read this book and read the detail in it for that military course. Because fucking Ali. I mean, congratulations on that, but congratulations on it. Because listening to that, listen to the you talk through it in the first podcast. Some pretty hairy shit you did, mate. I wouldn't have gone fucking crawling out of the current with the mortar. Yeah, I'll have to read it, mate. But going back, do you think that wanted to get back in potentially was just because there was there was more ops going on and FOMO, fear of missing out? Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, and the other thing as well is that, when you've, and I find it difficult. Let's get the words right. So, I mean, for me, being in the platoon, being in the PF, it was very special, very special. And of course, because we are sort of umbilical to the brigade and constantly surrounded by the reg and fed from, when I left, we were tri-service selection then, so we were taking, we'd had Marines come on the course, we'd had RAF regiment come on the course and that. So it was, I think after Sierra Leone was the turning point. And the development of the PF, their roles, their equipment, the way that they were being deployed, the whole development of the Pathfinder Group and the Brigade Reconnaissance Force kind of went stratospheric at that point. And I think it would have been a great time to be involved. And so there was that. And the fact that back on ops, and we're all selfish, aren't we? We all just want that. We all wanted that ops because there was such a period of inactivity, wasn't there? I mean, the drawing down of Ireland and everything. There was that period where, we didn't get to do anything. And then all of a sudden, from sort of 2000, it just went mental, didn't it, for whatever, 12, 13 years. So there was that. And as you said, FOMO, thinking to yourself, back with the blokes, back on ops, testing, doing what you love.
I think that's one of the biggest things is that when you deploy for the first time, no, not deploy. When you're involved when you get your first, probably like when you had your that very first, the first contact in the first night, probably that first time it happens, and and you realise, fucking hell, I'm pretty good at this, or I didn't flap, or I didn't, I was 100% of this. And it's relief. Because up to that point, for anyone, regardless of your rank, regardless of how many, ops you've been on before, without experiencing a battle like that, for just once, even just once, mate, you never know. You can never confirm in your head, when the shit hits the fan, could I cut the mustard? So whether you've done it like once or a million times, it's the first time that counts. And you know this, because you know in your head, when I think about it, it heads on the back of my neck, and it's like I think, yeah, I know, and the shit hits the fan. In the worst possible way, when someone's trying to kill you, I can fucking handle this. And not only that, I can handle it myself, and I can make, as a commander, you can make those critical decisions. You can act in the best possible way in the most hideous of circumstances, most dangerous of circumstances, not only looking after yourself, but looking after the people under your command. And I think that that one thing, when you understand that and you have faith in yourself, mate, you just want to go back and keep doing it because it's the sharp end of the spear. And I think that's that FOMO where the ops is. You just want to keep going back. I can do this. Let's go and do it again because this is the hardest thing I'll ever do in my life. It's the most dangerous thing I'll ever do in my life, and I'm fucking good at it.
Oh, it's like, professional athletes, whatever sportsman, whatever. Unless you physically, it doesn't matter how much training you have done. It doesn't matter how many miles you've cycled. Unless you're actually on the mountain stage of the Tour de France, you don't know how good you are. You don't know how you're going to react. So all of the rehearsals, all of the training, all of the exercises are great, but you don't know. And as you've said, it's that clarity of thought. How do you balance courage with caution? How do you inspire those people who are looking to you for that sort of guidance? How do you create the conditions where people have got so much confidence and they believe that with you they are better off without you? On a personal point of view, yeah. How, can I compartmentalise? Has all that resilience work paid off? Can I control emotion, fear? We haven't developed a medication yet that will take a feeling away. The resilience in us is how do we ring fence that feeling and then continue to act. So I'm scared, I'm petrified, adrenaline's coursing through my veins. There's doubt, there's anxiety, but they're emotions. I can't control them, but what I can do is fence them off and act upon it. And I think it's until you've had that sweat, sand, blood on your face, I don't think you'll ever know. And I think that's something that all soldiers need at least once.
Yeah, not just soldiers,
Yeah. And anything in the services, anything, fighter pilots, the minute they're engaged or in a dogfight or they're on a bombing run, whatever, it's that confidence that all the training, all the work, all the preparation, everything that you have done, and for a just cause, is now coming to fruition.
Yeah, I think that it's a good point. Saying just now, 2000 was almost like the start of craziness for 12, 13 years. Thinking about it, I think the position that the British military is in now, and the veterans, I think that as a nation, if the amount of people we got in the British population at the moment, or the UK population, it might not be British, UK population, is probably the most experienced, militarily experienced, regardless of what service you come from, regardless of what you do within that service, Army, Navy, RAF, probably the most experienced we've been. And I can't think how long. How long was the Second World War? Well, 5 years. 6 years.
6 years.
No, I'm not. No, granted,
I know what you mean.
Granted, there were a fuckload of people more involved in the Second World War. What I'm talking about, we got 13 years of people, 13 years worth of hundreds of thousands of people who are experienced in military campaigns. Probably, I'd argue, since the Second World War, probably the most experienced as a nation now, militarily as we are now. And the good thing about that is that I would suggest those people involved, we're probably the most mentally resilient in certain generations, as we could be. A lot of those people are out now. A lot of those people have been in, and done those operations in 2013. Look at the quality. Look at the quality of people we have in the veterans in Civvy Street now. It's a much bigger proportion than previously, I'd argue, just because of this span of operations, like you said, we have 12 or 13 years, mate. And there's huge value in it, and I think it's becoming more people are becoming more aware that now employers are more swinging more towards be more likely to employ veterans and have stigmas that they were there before, which leads me nicely on to ex-platoon, mate. We got about there we go. Tell me about your company, ex-platoon. Because you've done the book Ex-Platoon, done Operation Mayhem. Tell me about your company. We didn't get the chance to talk about it earlier. When did Ex-Platoon start?
It started in its current form 2 years ago. So I came when I left the military, and I tell you, I very, very quickly I went out to work in the UAE, and I ended up on a private contract, and I went out there as so it was just at 9/11. And we went out there to establish what in effect became a cross between Brecon and Warminster. So it was called the Combat Training Centre, fell under the Special Operations Command, and it was for training people. So I ended up
for the UAE military.
For the UAE.
Yeah.
So I went out there on a 2-year contract as an instructor. There was half a dozen Power Reg guys, a couple of SF, and we set up. It morphed into a 14-year contract, grew beyond, it went from about 11 of us being in country in 2002 to close to 350 being in country later. So I ended up being there, ran the Combat Training Centre, chief advisor, had a big, so I did chief ed. I had a big workforce under me, lots of 1, 2, 3 para guys, half a dozen Marines, a couple of SF guys, and as a team we developed this centre. I came back in 2015 immediately dropped into sort of the leadership, motivational speaking. My brother was a professional footballer, so I had an inroad into sort of the elite sports world, looking at development, motivation, team building, cohesion, discipline, looking at youth development within the academies. So I was doing that, doing a lot of speaking. It then went into education. I developed a program to work with children that are disengaged, 11 to 16-year-old, on the point of being excluded from mainstream school, disengaged, behavioural difficulties, issues in the classroom. So I developed a program to go into schools and using military values and ethos and to sort of reinforce classroom work, to work with them. So I was doing that, and I realised that, wouldn't it be great if I could do all of that outdoors? You know, take corporations on corporate businesses on value, teams, ethics, building that network, or, you know, sort of validating strategy planning, looking at education. So the whole thing. So that's when we formed Expertune. So Expertune has three elements to it, three facets to the business. So we have the education element, and I hope to be able to build an academy within the next 5 years as well, so that so we're looking at getting children outside, looking at resilience, health and well-being, arming them with real life skills, looking at communication, how you become successful, the understanding of being part of a team. We have the corporate element in the middle. It works the same so I now work with sort of elite sports. I'm working with Premiership clubs. I'm working with some clubs in the Championships. And again, building that sort of team ethos, leadership into their structures. And we have an overseas element. So we take people overseas. So I've got 4 trips. We do the desert, the jungle. I've got the Arctic going in March 2020. We take 16 people to Sweden. I've partnered up with, when I was in the PF, we used to do a lot of trips to Sweden, winter survival. The head of the SF training wing at the time was a good friend of mine. We kept in touch. He's now out. He has a business similar to mine. So we've partnered up. So we do a 8 days Arctic survival course. We've got a camp built in northeast Sweden, so you're 365 kilometres inside the Arctic Circle, and we take people in. You know, we do survival. You do husky dogs, mush your own husky dog team, snowmobiles. You know, underneath the Northern Lights, we've got a camp built. It's good food at the end of the day. There's even a sauna, and it's really sort of that whole escapism. So that's where we're at now, and it's we've introduced an indoor CQB range, so we now have.
I saw that.
Yeah, we now have Sig Sauer. So I bought
UK,
weapons
right?
from Sig. Yeah. So I got MCX rifles. I mean, they're air rifles, but they're perfectly. They're cosmetically and sort of ergonomically perfect to the weapons, and we've got 226 pistols. So they're semi-automatic. We go through the whole procedures. We teach people marksmanship. We coach them into sort of snap and instinctive shooting. We've got some CQB lanes inside. We're pushing it outdoor now. So I've built an IBSR, that old individual battle shooting range like they have in Brecon, darting between bits of cover, crawling into cover, engaging targets. So it's a bit of escapism, and it's sort of, veterans. I have a team of guys that come in and do guest instructors, a couple of ex-PF guys, a couple of ex-guys from down the road. So it's really good. It's awesome, mate. It's in a good place.
Good, mate. Good to hear it. Blokes always do well when they go fly alone and get a bit of entrepreneurial spirit. It's just realising they've got the capability. Do you know what I mean? A lot of people don't. I think I think British soldiers are very entrepreneurial. It's just having the confidence and the understanding of Civvy Street to action it.
That's the big thing, mate. My biggest learning curve over the last 2 years is business. you know, we come from an environment where we're not financially minded. And I tell you when I've suddenly become financially minded is that, you know, you go on the range in the military and you've got sandbags, you're throwing them away and you're burning figure 11s and figure 12s and that. And now I want figure 11 and figure 12 targets. If you can't get them off the blokes, you're on eBay and they're 30 quid. And I'm going, God, I used to throw this stuff away. So it's becoming commercially minded. That's the learning curve. Applying your skills and your knowledge and everything you do, that's not a problem. We do that. We get that, and we get it massive. We're not scared of hard work, long days, long hours. We don't financially expect to be swimming in money. That's not us. The biggest problem for us, or for me, was the financial aspect of it. Managing your own books, managing the cash flow, and doing media, becoming a social media guru, networking. They're the difficult things that we struggle with sometimes. Yeah. Well, I did.
Well, social media is because you're your age, but the networking.
Tap.
Where do people go to find out about X-Platoon?
www.xplatoon.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Go on the website. Everything's there. We do survival courses. We do family adventures for kids. We do dads and lads, mums and daughters combinations. The whole family sort of come for 24 hours, learn how to make a fire, water purify, learn how to navigate with the sun and stars, build a shelter, ditch technology, and just sort of reconnect over that in the wild, in the wilderness, in the woods, round the campfire. And it's just sort of that real connection again.
Cool.
Yeah.
Also, before we turn it off, people, Operation Mayhem and X-Platoon are Steve's two books. So Operation Mayhem, if you want to get into the nitty gritty in a more structured way than these two podcasts,
yeah,
go and get Operation Mayhem. It's available everywhere. Waterstones online, £3 on. Is it still £3 online on Amazon? Is that bargain on? Is it priced like that for the Northerners?
No, well, yeah. I mean, we you're giving away up there, mate. North of Doncaster, they're free.
Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Pleasure, mate.